is this how you're reading the first couple of verses in Genesis 6? I'll read back to you so I do not misrepresent your view. When people began to increase in number on the earth and they had daughters, some godly men saw that some ungodly women were beautiful and they took them to procreate.
Relatively, if I could just clarify two maybe small points, I think sons of God refers to righteous people, but as we know, righteous people can still sin. We're counted as righteous by our faith and by our actions oriented at God. Doesn't mean we're perfect. We're baptized, we still are capable of sin. So yeah, a son of God in that sense would be a man or woman who had subscribed to God through faith. And then the daughters of men, I believe, is a phrase relating to men or women who do not have faith toward God, are not in Christ.
So daughters of humans can mean sons of humans? Is that what you said?
I think it's a phrase, like an idiom that would refer to men and women, potentially.
Daughters of humans can refer to sons of humans? Sorry, I've never heard that. Do you have a verse for that? Or where does daughters mean sons?
Look, I haven't done a search on the phrase daughters of men particularly.
Well, I can tell you
it could just be wives, but what I'm suggesting is it seems to just be idiomatic language. The sons of God married the daughters of men. That whole phrase together seems to be more of an idiom rather than being highly specific about the genders involved. Because sons of God, from the New Testament, obviously refers to women as well. You'd agree with that, right? Sons can be women in the New Testament.
Yes, but again, you're making a false parallel. Like I already went through this. So let's move ahead. Basically, the opening verses of Genesis 6, humans doing what God commanded us to do, to multiply, be fruitful, right? Procreate, etc. So why does God say what he say in the following verse 3? So in other words, are the actions we are doing as humans in verses 1 and 2, is that what leads to God harsh judgment, not only on humanity, but in killing all things?
So I believe you've got to keep reading the whole context. But yes, I believe the first two verses prep us to see that faithful people are becoming unequally yoked with the unfaithful. And if you take the whole Torah together, we see that people were actually having these unions and then sacrificing their children and things like that. We see in Leviticus 18 an example of that.
But we are way before the commandments of Sinai. I mean, you're quoting me Law of Moses.
In terms of context, though, the Torah was kind of compiled.
The marriage commandments you're citing are not known in Genesis 6. Do we agree?
Okay, yeah, yes. That in terms of the...
Sorry, let me say this. Humanity is starting. We have to kickstart the whole thing. There's no commandment anywhere you can point to in the first chapters of Genesis anywhere. I mean, you're citing Leviticus. You're going way past the timeline.
So Leviticus was written about later events, but it was all compiled at the same time to show us a long range of human history into the past. Like you would agree that not every historical event is recorded in Genesis, and that later books do give us a lens through which to view the Genesis events.
To say that the people kickstart humanity are under later Mosaic covenant laws regarding mixing marriages, etc.
That's not what I'm saying. Sorry,
that's not what you're saying. What are you saying?
Just that we can see God's expectations and understand what the words mean all through the Torah by the context, but it's describing events in a certain way. The context tells us which way to interpret those events.
Dean, was there a commandment at this time in Genesis 6 not to intermarry or mix marriage, or is there such a commandment from God?
I believe yes. So Paul makes the argument in Romans that before the law of Moses, they were still under a law. There was death beforehand. So my view is that God's moral law has been there from the beginning, similar to Cain and Abel's sacrifices, one being accepted and one not. We don't have a direct command about sacrifice at that point, but then we get shown context later that helps show us why. But God obviously would have had specific commands for these people that they were aware of at the time. Okay. It's just all of human history isn't written down.
In Genesis 9, after the flood, right, the commandment, the original commandment of Genesis, 1, to be fruitful and multiply, is repeated. So after God wipes out every human except the family of Noah in Genesis 9:1, fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. The next verse is not God suddenly switching around and going, wait a minute, you guys are committing evil or something. Anyway, let me go beyond that to my next questions. You said the New Testament is commentary on the Old Testament, which I agreed. So why did you ignore completely Peter and Jude?
I don't know that I did. Sorry.
In your opening, you totally, yeah.
I guess in my opening, with only a short time frame, I wanted to really establish my definitions and really establish some arguments for my position and against the other. Looking then to the context of individual passages, once I've got those definitions in place, is a bit easier. So I did respond to your opening statement in my rebuttal.
You don't believe Peter and Jude are referring to Genesis 6?
No, I do. Like I said in my rebuttal to your positions, I do believe it's referring to it. And I tried to show that I believe it's not saying those kept in chains only refers to the particular people or angels or spiritual beings from Genesis 6. I tried to show that in my rebuttal, but I wanted to have my definitions in place first because, like I said in my Q&A to you, angel, Elohim, sons of God, they can be interpreted too spiritually. So I want to really establish that before I went to analyze texts.
Okay, so they do refer to before the flood, Peter and Jude, those references. 1 Peter 3, 2 Peter 2, and Jude. They are referring to okay, we agree. Take me through again to who the spirits, unqualified, usually angels, not humans. So Jesus goes down, it says, to speak to these spirits. So who are they?
So my view is you cannot have a sinning angel, which I made some cases for in my opening and rebuttal. Isaiah 42, I just quickly read these two passages. I'm Yahweh, I've called you in righteousness, talking about the Messiah. I will take you by the hand and keep you. I'll give you as a covenant for the people, a light to the nations. So it's about people and nations. To open the eyes that are blind, to bring out the prisoners from the dungeon, from the prison, those who sit in darkness. So it's about people and the nation of Israel, and then the Gentile nations.
1 Peter 3:19 is talking about humans who are in prison, which you understand as a metaphor for death. Is that right?
So I guess there's a couple of possibilities on that. I don't think Jesus literally preached to dead humans. No. I mean, it is possible that I'm wrong about that.
Hold on. So they're not human then. The spirits in prison, are they human or are they not human?
Yes.
And Jesus speaks to these humans who are where and doing what or what?
So during his 40 days of ministry after resurrection, but before his ascension. So we know that there was a period of time there, potential moment where he is preaching to those kept in darkness, which in John 3, he defines as those who love the darkness, the scribes, Pharisees, Israelites who love darkness, who are slaves to it. They are in chains.
Yeah, you're changing what Peter's saying. Peter says he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, who in former times did not obey when God waited patiently in the days of Noah, not during his ministry, not post-resurrection. Why are you changing the timeline here?
So that's what I tried to show in my rebuttal. I think there's a kind of disconnect there where he's talking about in the days of Noah, God's people did these kinds of actions, and he's doing that as a segue into baptism and the new covenant. But before that, he's talking about those kept in chains to show us he's referring to the Israelites, God's chosen people in general, not as a specific particular person or individuals. He's talking in a national sense, I believe there, that God's people are in chains. God's people are in darkness.
But again, you're completely changing what 1 Peter 3 is saying.
No,
Peter 3 is very clear. These spirits, those who in the days of Noah committed some kind of sin. So let me advance this issue with 2 Peter 2. What or where is Tartarus?
Yeah, so I think Tartarus isn't a literal place. I think Tartarus is just another word or reference to being dead in the ground in Sheol, not having life or something like that.
So Tartarus is another name for the grave, for Sheol?
Something like that. So Jesus said, let the dead bury their dead. They weren't literally dead. It was an analogy for them being spiritually dead. And so I think the same is probably going on here.
People can check this, but what you just said is not agreed upon by anyone, I believe. that Tartarus equals shell and shell is Tartarus. That's just not something I've ever heard. And people
I don't think
check
it equals it. I think it's using a reference at the time.
You just said it is Tartarus is shell. You just said that.
In the sense that it's just an analogy to refer to people who are out of Christ, people who are not saved, people who are condemned, under condemnation, people who need the atonement of Christ.
Why are people called angels who sinned in 2 Peter 2:4?
Certain humans God appointed to certain responsibilities, like the king of Tyre was appointed to a certain responsibility, and it says that it's like he fell. He was meant to be a bright star, but he fell. He was appointed as an angel, a cherubim, and he fell. But humans can be appointed to high positions, not keep those positions, and fall from grace.
It has nothing to do with positions. Angels, or angel means messenger.
Yeah.
Okay, you're saying they're human. So they're human messengers who sinned. Is that your position?
More or less, yeah.
Who are they representing, and what was their message during the days of Noah before the flood?
Calling on the name of Yahweh. If you look all through the Torah, that's actually a repeated phrase, calling on the name of Yahweh. And to bear God's name, to bear Yahweh's name is actually one of the 10 commandments all throughout Scripture. Having Yahweh's name and bearing it is considered a sacred duty. And so you could be called an angel if you were bearing, carrying, transmitting God's name to people through your actions, your words, your preaching, your establishment of his words.
Yeah, but we don't see the word. There's no angels before Genesis 6. There's no angels in Genesis 4. They're messengers because they carry the name of God. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that would be part of the whole package. Yeah,
but that's not a definition of messenger, Dean. Let me ask you this last question. I only have a minute or
Malak
so.
can also be representative. If you look up Strong's or any of the lexicons, messenger, Malak,
you're a messenger. You're bringing a message of someone.
Or representing someone, yeah.
Who before Africanus, so Africanus is what, 3rd century AD or so. Who before him, who I believe, or most that I've read, see as progenitor, the one who first introduced the angels as humans. Anyone before him that held the view that you're espousing now, or sons of Seth, or whatever you want to call them?
Specifically about Genesis 6, I think that's the first reference we still have. So
it comes that's my point. It comes
in terms of our manuscript evidence, it comes from a vacuum. But I'm talking about the people
in terms of testimony. You got Qumran, you got Philo, BC times, you got Josephus, you got the so-called church fathers, who, by the way, I do not, just to your point about Michael Heiser and others, just because I agree with, some people on one point doesn't mean I endorse everything else.
Yeah.
I do not endorse Philo and his crazy theology, as you know. So my point is, it does come in a vacuum. Africanus is the one who all of a sudden breaks tradition, breaks the understanding that was very clear from not only BC times, earliest AD Christians.
In a vacuum refers to our manuscript traditions, the historical records we have. That doesn't mean
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an understanding of an event of a.
So what I'm saying is, though, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. How would we know that the general population of Christians at the time, that there wasn't others who held this view?
Well, that's an argument from silence. If you know your
no. Well, that's what I'm saying about yours. Actually, that we just don't have the info of what the widespread beliefs were.
Yeah, because no one believed that.